All right, we are live. Sorry about that. I had 4 or 5 false starts, I believe. We had more than a handful of people on. I think they've all abandoned the stream because the stops and starts. But what we had talked about, and I'd actually given 10 minutes of commentary on the breaking news on the Inspector General's report. It's going to be released now, they're saying, on June 14th. It's a bit of a delay, and one of the important issues that we need to discuss about the IG report is that we heard recently leaks about what's in the report, and the reason those leaks were probably made was because there are concerns, Trump mentioned them, other people have mentioned them, that the Inspector General's report will be heavily edited or redacted from its original findings. And one of the original findings, supposedly, according to sources, is that James Comey was, quote, insubordinate. Now, that's quite a charge for him to be insubordinate. They went through what he had done, said that he had not followed protocol properly, and if that's the case, then he may be subject to a recommendation for criminal charges. We don't know. Also, the Inspector General's report did mention that Loretta Lynch also is under scrutiny for the way that she acted during the Clinton email investigation. So the reason for those leaks are, if the next or the final draft that comes out in a week from today, June 14th, doesn't have that information, then it's going to create a situation where people are going to want to know, they want Congress and the public, what did the original report said, what did the different drafts say. So what happens is, apparently the Inspector General writes his report, and then the people that are mentioned in it get a chance to look at it. And of course, if they're portrayed in a light which is unfavorable or a light in which they think is incorrect, they get to, with their lawyers, to request a change to the document. Now, if they make a request to the change to the document and it gets made, we don't know whether that change would have been made as a result of politics, a result of pressure. So that's the reason I believe that they leaked this information in the first place, because it does show James Comey, at least to be, or the report is, that he was insubordinate. So we'll see what happens when that report comes out. It probably will, they overuse the word bombshell, but it probably will, because up till now, the people that have been watching and paying attention to the Clinton email investigation and then the Russian investigation have fallen basically into two camps, and those are basically pro-Trump supporters who believe that the Clinton email investigation was handled incorrectly, that the fix was in, and then the follow-on Russian investigation was handled by the same people, and it was out to get Trump. And then the reverse on the other side are the anti-Trumpers who believe that the Clinton email investigation was handled. It was handled by law enforcement. It was handled by our intelligence agencies. We have to trust them. And the same goes for the Russian investigation. Those people believe that it was basically didn't amount to a hill of beans what Hillary Clinton had done with her email. She had done things maybe a little carelessly, but according to James Comey, nothing to prosecute. The Department of Justice signed off on it too. No big deal. And on the flip side, they believe that what supposedly Trump had done amounted to collusion. It deserves to be investigated, and we have to, quote, trust our intelligence agencies. Now, the reason I say that's all going to change, if the Inspector General's report, which is supposed to be an objective portion of the Department of Justice, comes out and says that the procedures and protocols were violated in both the Clinton email investigation and the Russian investigation, then it'll be interesting to see the anti-Trumpers, who have been to this point very stalwart in saying that the we have to listen to our intelligence agencies. We have to trust the DOJ. We have to support law enforcement. Well, if it turns out that the Inspector General's report says there's reason not to trust law enforcement, that a lot of what they did was incorrect, which is what the preliminary leaks are saying, well, it'll be interesting to see if public sentiment will turn away from. Now, of course, if you are a dyed-in-the-wool anti-Trumper, you're not going to change your mind. You've already convinced yourself that Donald Trump sat down with Vladimir Putin and came up with the term crooked Hillary, and you're just going to think that the Inspector General is now just working for Trump. But I think that there will be a lot of information in the report, and it'll be difficult to reject it all out of hand. So we'll see what happens with the Inspector General report when it comes out a week from today. That's breaking news. The Inspector General has agreed to meet with the congressional leaders to go through it. But the real key will be to see if they can actually get a handle on what it was in the original drafts before the people that were the subjects of the report were able to make redactions or changes or things like that. So we don't know yet that what they say the leaks are about Comey being insubordinate. My guess would be they were leaked and they wouldn't have made that up. And I think it's a legitimate leak, and I think the reason for the leak was if it's not in there when the report comes out, then people are going to question where did that come from. And I think Congress would then want to demand the original drafts of the Inspector General's report and see what's in it. Now, moving on to the other topic, gold sales at the U.S. Mint. Now, gold sales at the U.S. Mint have been horrific, as have the silver sales, especially the past 12 months. The silver sales are at lows not seen since 2005. Later in the week, by the weekend, I should have up on Smaulgld.com the charts for the American Gold Eagle, American Gold Buffalo, and American Silver Eagle sales. You can check those out at Smaulgld.com. And they are showing, at least in May and June, on the gold side, somewhat of an increase. Now, the question is whether that reflects any change in sentiment. Remember, gold sales at the U.S. Mint, Perth Mint, those retail sales are basically an insignificant amount of gold demand, but they do reflect sentiment of retail investors. So in 1999, prior to the Y2K supposed disaster that was going to happen when the computers didn't roll over and all the computer systems were going to fail, there was massive gold, well, not massive, but massive for the U.S. Mint. They sold over 2 million ounces of gold at the U.S. Mint that year. And then even during the financial crisis, the U.S. Mint would sell about 1.2. But in recent years, the last 2 years, including this year, sales have really fallen off. And I think in April, they sold like 2,000 American Gold Eagle, 1 ounce American Gold Eagles, and only about 1,000 American Gold Buffaloes. Now, in May, that number did jump up to 18,500 American Gold Eagles and 16,500 American Gold Buffaloes. Now, that's not a lot, but it's still a tremendous leap over the April sales. The question is whether the authorized purchasers who buy the American Gold Eagles, American Gold Buffaloes directly from the U.S. Mint were just tapping up for basically having not bought gold from the U.S. Mint for a few months. And we're looking to see whether there'll be any follow-through sales in June, July, August, and the rest of the year. Now, in July so far, there are some decent sales numbers. 5,000 American Gold Buffaloes, 5,000 American Gold Eagles sold. Again, not a lot, but still still just in the first week, more than they were selling in entire months in May, March, and April. Again, we'll have to see where that all leads. But the point that people have been making recently is somewhat thinking that it's bullish for gold. We saw it in Gold Core. I think we saw it in Peter Schiff. They're highlighting that the sales of ETFs, gold ETFs, are on the rise, and they're quoting that from the World Gold Council. Now, the problem with ETFs are we're not sure. When people buy ETFs, they're not buying gold the same way as they would if they were buying gold coins, because you have no real claim, depending on the ETF, on any delivery of that gold. And basically, people who buy gold ETFs, they generally don't want the gold, because if they did, they would order it and take delivery. What they're looking for is price exposure to the price of gold. And that means they really don't want to deal with the insurance, the storing, the redemption. They're just looking to trade the gold price. Now, gold sales of ETFs are up, but is that at the expense of physical gold sales? So not quite sure what's going on there. If people think the price of gold is going to rise, yeah, maybe they're playing it for a 10% pop, but they're not playing it as a real defensive measure against any type of financial crisis. Because remember, if there was a financial crisis, and like we had in 2008, and they closed the stock markets down, well, then you're in a situation where even if the price of gold, whatever happens to the price of gold, your ETF should reflect it. But if the stock market is closed, there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot realize your gain. You can't take your losses. You can't access your capital. It's just as if you had had a stock and you could no longer trade it. So not sure why people are buying gold ETFs. The World Gold Council is making a big deal out of it. Is it some type of interest or demand for gold? We saw Peter Schiff tout. They're touting it as if it means there's gold demand, but to me, the gold demand it has to be physical demand. You have to see people buying physical gold, because if they're not, and they're buying ETFs, those are traders. They're not necessarily people who are concerned about the health of the financial system. They just think that technically, perhaps, it might be a good time to buy gold or silver. Now, the silver ETFs have also have a decent amount of inflows. They've remained elevated, and the gold ETFs are now approaching levels that we last saw in 2013. Now, I'm going to stop for a second because I do not see anything in the chat box. I do have a decent number of people watching. I've got up to 8 people watching, but we've had issues with partially on my end, with my encoder, but also on the YouTube, and I don't see any comments. I'm not sure if people are hearing it. I know that the volume wasn't working before, so if someone can write a comment just to let me know that, there you go, my Pokemons let me show them to you by Air Jordans. Haha. Rob is talking about Jordans. He sent me a direct message earlier today, I think it was, when I was mentioning that the price of silver is so low that they're saying that vanilla is more expensive, and I think these Jordans, Rob, are also expensive. I think would you say that people are paying twice the price of them just to get to reserve a pair? When's the last time you had to send your bullion dealer money in advance just to reserve a silver eagle? We haven't seen that. Now, there was a period of time, people don't remember, but maybe they do remember. Back in 2015, the U.S. Mint, the Canadian Mint, they actually did run out of American silver eagles and Canadian maple leafs. And there was a period of time, and I started tracking it, and I still track it, the premiums on American eagles, they actually hit 50%. So if you want, they launched Saturday. Get your Jordans. If you wanted American silver eagles, you had to pay a 50% premium in 2015. And remember, 2015 was the year when the price of silver actually hit its bottom. That is another trend in U.S. silver and gold buying, when the price is on its way down and heading down significantly. So in 2015, the high price of silver was $18.52, I think. The low price was close to $12. When you see those prices fall, that's when people get interested. They think they're getting a bargain. Or on the flip side, as the price rises, you see people pouring into silver eagles, gold as well. But the problem in the last 12 months has been the prices of gold and silver have been relatively flat, so you're not really seeing much buying there. they should re-release the pump sneaker along with a branded token offer. Yes, there should be a Jordan pump IPO, and maybe Michael Jordan can give the go long pump coin. Yes. Speaking of pump coins, the SEC looks like they're ready to give Coinbase some type of status where they will register, I think, as an alternative trading system. And if they get that, that will mean that they will be able to sell certain other tokens other than just Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Now, the reason I believe they sell Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum is they've made the determination that those are not securities, and therefore they don't need to get exemptions. But some of the other tokens, they're not sure. They could be ICOs. They could be deemed securities. There's no guidance on that, and they've stayed away from them. But if they get this, and it looks like they're going to get it because they put out on their blog that they were working on it. This was back in April, and they put out something again yesterday. If they get that, that would probably create a situation where ICOs might want to go, and the SEC has been complaining that companies doing ICOs have not been bringing their documents to them to be reviewed and get registered. And if that's the case, then you might start to see Wall Street-backed ICOs trading on Coinbase. Now, that would be a big deal because that's where you'd get institutional investors who'd feel comfortable that they're trading on a registered exchange and that they are trading or buying and selling a registered security. That probably have a big impact on the crypto market. Don't know if it would have any impact on the gold or silver market. Question is, what exactly would have a big impact on the gold and silver market? We really haven't seen any movement. We've seen basically gold and silver flat, and there's nothing really on the horizon. There have to be something that we're not really paying attention to that might raise the prices of gold and silver. And of course, if the prices of gold and silver were to rise, you'd probably see an increase in gold and silver U.S. mint buying. And if the prices were to fall, although I believe that the silver prices probably don't have that much to fall, but who knows? How long before mining companies start issuing in-house cryptos, says Joshua Roberts. You know, I actually had a conversation with somebody. The mining companies really need to do something to promote themselves, because right now most of them are captive to not just the price, but because the price is so low, their financing options seem to be limited to creating streaming contracts. The problem with a streaming contract is the streaming company like Sandstrom or Franco-Nevada or Wheaton Silver, whatever it's called, they offer these companies financing, and then they say, well, sell me your silver at, let's say, $5 an ounce when it comes out. Give me the gold for $800. And then these companies end up mining all the R&D and the work that they do, and end up selling their silver for below market prices, while the streamer then collects that. They have no risk. They just have a contract. The only risk they have is that the miner decides not to follow through on the contract. But if they do follow through on the contract, basically the streamer sits back and has the product sold to them at a much lower price. And that's why the streamers over the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't taken the big hit the way the miners have. But if miners, they probably would expect to see. Streaming contracts are a sign of resignation. I usually run for of course, yes. When you see a miner decide that they have to enter into a streaming contract, that really means that they can't make it on their own. They can't get financing, and they're basically saying, yeah, we'll stay in business, but we will take whatever the streamer gives us. And that's right. Juniors especially should reach out for better investor relations and get more aggressive with the equity financing. And the problem with investor relations is it has to be done right. I think if you just do it on, you see it on, I don't want to mention the outlets when they're pumping these junior stocks. I'm not sure that attracts the significant capital that you need to be serious about getting a proper equity raise. And then the other thing that they could consider, and you don't see much of it yet, and there was a lot of talk that it might happen, are that these junior miners would sell themselves to the larger miners, and we haven't seen a lot of M&A activity there. And the other thing you saw was, exactly, don't name drop, but it is, yeah, you have to do investor relations correct, I believe. But there's so little there's not much demand right now. I guess you have to drum it up. But first, what is the one that Keith Newmeyer, First Financial Mining? He has bought apparently a lot of these juniors. I don't even know if they're even, that most of them aren't in operation. He doesn't intend to raise capital to make them productive. He's actually holding them, I believe, so that he could sell them. Now, that basically means that First Financial, whatever it's called, mining, they're just holding on to non-productive assets and hoping that there becomes interest in them where somebody wants to come along and buy them because they want to make those mines operational. Well, that means that those companies aren't even potential streamer resignation type companies because they don't produce anything for the streamers to want to buy. So the mining industry is problematic. Now, a lot of people are saying with gold, well, we've reached peak gold. We saw one of the gold people say, yeah, there is First Mining Finance Corp. And I don't know the name of the company. It wasn't Goldcore. It wasn't Newmont. But one of the big CEOs said, you know, we're hitting peak gold. Now, peak gold is not, and of course, then the gold people think that when we hit peak gold, we're going to have a real issue. We're going to have shortages, and that's going to drive the price of gold higher. Well, the thing about what we know about the gold market is there's 190,000 tons of gold, they say, that's above ground and around, and they only add to that, what, 2,500, currently, 2,500 tons a year. So very little percentage of the gold mined each year, I'm doing the numbers right now, yeah, it's 1.3% additional gold is added to the stocks of gold. So if you were to see, let's say, a decline of half of the gold that's mined today, from 2,500 tons of gold down to, you know, let's say 1,300 tons of gold, it's not going to have that much of an impact on the amount of gold because, well, that's true. Official above ground gold is a running joke. And it's even more so a joke, Joshua, when you take into account silver, because no one really knows silver. We were talking the other day about the silver supply and demand dynamic. They're trying to say silver's in deficit. It's been in deficit for like 20 years. Yes, I think all these stats are laughable because no one really has any way of knowing. A lot of stuff flies under the radar. For example, the silver that's produced as a byproduct by some of the larger mines that aren't even precious metals mines probably doesn't even get reported because it's not material to their operating results, but it could be material amounts of silver. So I think when people look at these supply-demand numbers and then try to extrapolate that it means a shortage or we're out of gold or out of silver, even if the numbers are correct as are, we do know that the mining numbers, those are probably, the annual mining numbers for gold are probably better than the annual amount of gold that's produced for silver. But even so, we know that the amount of gold produced each year, most of that new gold goes to jewelry. And if you would see some type of increase in price of gold, you will also see an increase in secondary gold coming to market because you have the people who hold gold will obviously turn it in and get and it happens in India all the time. They say 25,000 tons of gold in India, and when the price rises, the Indians will go and turn their gold in, and a lot of gold gets smelted down in Switzerland and sent to other places, but I don't think that if you see a decline in gold mining that there would be any real impact in price, is what they're saying. Now, with silver, there might be, because much of the silver that's produced gets immediately sent to manufacturers who make electronics, who make solar panels, things like that. And there you might have an issue of bottlenecks, because even though there might be, if the price were to rise because there was some type of bottleneck in silver, it would take longer for secondary silver to reach the manufacturers, just because a lot of people have to empty their drawers and silverware in order to get that silver to market. Although when we saw the massive silver demand in 2015 with record Indian silver imports and record silver coin, bar, and round sales in 2015, we didn't see any, we heard, but we never saw any shortage in, or any bottleneck in production of electronics. There were rumors, but we didn't see it. And also, we didn't see any industrial silver company, electronic company, solar company saying there's going to be a delay here, or we can't afford to pay $50 an ounce. So we didn't see any stresses, at least that we learned about, even at those record silver demand numbers in 2015 and those record prices in 2011. So it will be interesting to see. I don't think we're anywhere near any type of silver shortage, gold shortage, and certainly we're not at any price stress point for silver industrial manufacturers. Anyone has any questions on the Inspector General's report? I know there's some people out there that think that, well, I don't want to get into it at the moment. I think I'm going to end this, unless there's any questions on the gold and silver dynamics or on the IG report. And it looks like there are none. So we're going to cut it short. I want to thank everyone for joining, and we'll try to do this. I'll try to do, if I have time in the evenings, try to put together a half an hour, put aside a half an hour if you want to check in this time. Yeah, you missed the IG coverage. I mentioned that they've announced now June 14th, they're going to come out with the Inspector General's report. I mentioned that there have been leaks. You're probably aware of what the leaks were. And I mentioned the reason for the leaks was probably just to make sure that if the final report that comes out doesn't include some of the leaked damaging information about Comey and Loretta Lynch, that people can be asking, well, what happened to it? Because there's some suspicion right now that, Stacking Nerd, welcome, that there's some suspicion right now that Rosenstein or others are trying to hold back the production or the release of the IG report. They're also concerned that they are making changes to the report at the request of those mentioned in the report, like James Comey. The last thing Comey needs after going out and playing sanctimonious is that he then is accused of being insubordinate. And if those were the words that were in a draft and they're not in the final copy, at least now people are on notice, and they're going to want to know why. Well, that's right. Rosenstein could be part of the conspiracy. The issue with Rosenstein is he wrote a scathing letter to Donald Trump saying why Comey had to be fired. Rosenstein is a witness in all of this stuff, and surprising, he hasn't recused himself. Jeff Sessions recused himself for merely standing next to and talking to a Russian guy at the Republican convention, whereas Rosenstein is knee-deep in all this stuff, and he's actually in charge of supervising Mueller. So the Inspector General's report will come out on the 14th, and it's going to be about how the Hillary Clinton email campaign, a Hillary Clinton email investigation was run, and that's pretty obvious that a lot of mistakes were made. James Comey came out and said that, first of all, what he did, which was totally insubordinate, was not only did he usurp the power of the Attorney General by saying, we're not going to press charges, that is for the Attorney General to do, but he also made that announcement with the tacit understanding that Loretta Lynch had basically said, well, I'm not going to recuse myself, so I'll do what Comey says. She shouldn't even be allowed to delegate her power that way to Comey, but what Comey said the day of the press conference where he said he wasn't going to prosecute Hillary Clinton was that no one knows about what I'm going to say right now. So he hadn't even cleared it with Loretta Lynch. So this is the type of insubordination I think that they're talking about in the report, that basically Comey just decided he was going to do, and he also has said subsequent to that press conference in his interviews in his book that he took politics into account and reopening the investigation because he didn't want Hillary Clinton to have a taint. But there's no way during that week when he reopened the investigation that he reopened it for show only to help her. But there's no way that they went through those emails that were supposedly found that they had to look at and make a determination. And there's so many other issues with how he conducted the investigation, who he gave immunity to, the fact that he did not request the survey from the DNC and they just took their word for it. So there's a lot of things that the Inspector General can easily criticize James Comey for. There's issues with Strzok. There's issues across the board. And it's going to be interesting to see, Joshua, that I mentioned at the beginning, how the people that have been anti-Trump, who have been praising law enforcement and say, we've got to listen to law enforcement. The email deal was no big deal. We saw the FBI, they cleared her. Republicans are just making a big deal out of it. Well, if the Inspector General report comes out and says, no, they did it wrong, it was a huge mistake, we can't trust everything they do, whether they're going to, which I doubt they will, say, oh, we have to accept the findings of the Inspector General's report, they're going to say things like, well, he's working for Trump now. They've so conditioned themselves to believe that Hillary did nothing wrong, and that was a witch hunt, and that with Donald Trump did something wrong, he did collude, and then, you know, the FBI CIA was absolutely proper to go after him, and they're getting support from unlikely places like Trey Gowdy, saying, and I was going to say Nolan Ryan, wherever that guy is, Paul Ryan, saying that basically, you know, they were helping Trump by spying or planning a spy in his campaign. And let me get back to some. I didn't expect all these comments here. We're just trying to sign off, but we'll go further here. Hillary, let's go back here. Whoa, there's a lot here. Hey, a stack. Hillary belongs in jail. Good platform. Rosenstein's part of the conspiracy. What gets me is anyone being surprised. We all know Lynch, Comey, etc. were weaponizing federal agencies to go after conservatives. Well, you had Lynch, Comey, and then you had the IRS issue as well. Rosenstein's deep state swamp creature. Rosenstein, that's right. Rosenstein signed off on FISA, on one of the FISA applications. Now, that goes to the heart of